The warning signal came at exactly 0800 hours on a Tuesday morning. Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee in the command center of Luna Station when the deep space sensors picked up the massive alien fleet approaching Earth's solar system. The coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the metal floor as he stared at the impossible readings on his screen. How many ships? Jake asked his communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Miller, who was frantically checking and rechecking. As sensor data. Sir, our computers are showing over 800 vessels. Some of them are bigger than anything we have ever seen before. Sarah's voice was shaking as she spoke. Jake had been preparing for this day for 5 years, ever since the first alien scout ships were detected at the edge of their solar system. The Earth Defense Force had been working day and night to build up their defenses, but nobody really believed the aliens would come back with such a massive fleet. Get me President Hayes on the secure channel, Jake ordered. And wake up Commander Brooks. We need her intelligence team ready in 10 minutes. The alien fleet was still 3 days away from Earth, but their message arrived much faster than their ships. The transmission came through on all frequencies at once, drowning out every radio signal on the planet. When the static cleared, a terrifying alien face appeared on every screen across Earth. Admiral Krex Vorthik was 7 feet tall with dark purple skin and 4 yellow eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. His voice was deep and cold as he spoke in perfect English, which somehow made his words even more frightening. Humans of Earth, Admiral Vorthik began. I am Admiral Krex Vorthik of the Zephyrian Galactic Empire. We have conquered 300 star systems and enslaved 47 different species. Your pathetic little world is next. Jake watched the transmission from the emergency command bunker deep beneath Luna Station. Around him, dozens of military officers and government officials sat in stunned silence as the alien admiral continued. His speech. You have 7 of your solar cycles to surrender completely. All humans will become slaves of the Empire. Your leaders will be executed. Your cities will be destroyed if you resist. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning. The transmission ended with images of other worlds that had been conquered by the Empire. Burning cities, destroyed fleets, and millions of aliens being loaded onto slave ships. The message was clear. Surrender or die. President William Hayes arrived at Luna Station 6 hours later, along with the entire Earth Defense Council. The president was a tall man with gray hair who had led Earth through many crises, but Jake had never seen him look so worried. What are our options, Captain? President Hayes asked as he sat down at the conference table. Commander Lisa Brooks, the head of military intelligence, spread out her reports on the table. She was a brilliant woman who had been studying alien technology for years, trying to understand how their enemies thought and fought. Sir, the Zephyrian Empire has never lost a war, Lisa explained. They have conquered every species they have ever encountered. Their ships are bigger and more powerful than anything we have. But we have been preparing, Jake said firmly. Chief Engineer Ryan Carter has been working on our secret project for 3 years. If it works, we might have a chance. Ryan Carter was waiting in the engineering section of Luna Station with the plans for Protocol 7. He was a quiet man who preferred working with machines to talking with people. But his inventions had saved Earth many times before. The defense network is almost ready, Ryan reported when they called him to the meeting. We need 2 more days to finish the final preparations. The question is whether the aliens will give us that much time. President Hayes looked around the table at his advisors. Do we try to negotiate with them? Maybe we can buy more time. Sir, I don't think that will work, Lisa said. Our intelligence shows that the Empire has never accepted a surrender that did not include complete slavery. They enjoy destroying other civilizations. Jake stood up and walked to the large window that showed Earth hanging in space below them. The blue and green planet looked so peaceful, with white clouds swirling around the continents. It was hard to believe that in 3 days it might be under attack by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "We fight," Jake said quietly. "We have no choice but to fight." The next 2 days passed quickly as Earth prepared for war. Every military base on the planet was placed on high alert. Civilian populations were moved to underground shelters. The defense satellites that orbited Earth powered up their weapons systems for the first time. But the real preparations were happening in secret locations throughout the solar system. For 5 years, Ryan Carter and his team of engineers had been building something that no alien empire had ever encountered before. Hidden bases on asteroids, cloaked ships waiting in the darkness between planets, and weapons that used technology the Zephyrians had never seen. On the morning of the 3rd day, Admiral Vorthic's fleet reached the outer edge of the solar system. The alien ships were massive and beautiful in a terrifying way, with sleek metal hulls that gleamed in the light of the sun. Each ship was the size of a city, armed with weapons that could destroy entire planets. Admiral Vorthic stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, and looked at the readings from his sensors. The human homeworld looked exactly like all the other primitive planets he had conquered. A few small defense satellites, some tiny military ships, and a population that would soon be begging for mercy. "Begin the final approach," Admiral Vorthic ordered his fleet commanders. "I want this conquest finished quickly. The Emperor is expecting these new slaves to be delivered within the week." But as the Zephyrian fleet moved closer to Earth, something was bothering the alien admiral. His sensors were showing strange readings from the asteroid belt and the outer planets. There seemed to be more metal and energy signatures than a primitive civilization should have. Jake Morrison watched the approaching alien fleet from his command center and smiled grimly. The Zephyrians thought they were attacking a helpless world, but they had no idea what humanity had been building in the darkness of space. In a few hours, Admiral Vorthic and his mighty empire would learn what happened when they threatened Earth. Trap was set, and the hunters were about to become the hunted. The meeting was arranged to take place on New Geneva Station, a neutral space platform that orbited between Earth and Mars. Ambassador Helen Parker had been chosen to lead the human delegation because she was the best diplomat Earth had ever produced. She had solved conflicts between nations and helped make peace in dozens of wars. But she had never faced anything like this before. Helen was a woman in her 50s, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes that never showed fear, even when she was terrified inside. As she walked through the corridors of New Geneva Station toward the meeting room, she could feel her heart beating fast, but her face remained perfectly calm. Captain Jake Morrison watched from his ship, the Terra Nova, which was hiding behind one of Mars' moons. He had wanted to be at the meeting himself, but President Hayes had decided it was too dangerous to risk losing their best military commander if the talks went wrong. "Remember, Helen," Jake said through the secure communication link, "we're not expecting these negotiations to work. We just need to buy time and learn everything we can about them." The Zephyrian delegation arrived in a small but impressive ship that was still twice the size of anything humans had built. Sub-Commander Xylix Corthan stepped out of the alien vessel wearing a military uniform covered in medals and symbols that probably represented all the worlds he had helped conquer. Corthan was shorter than Admiral Vorthic, but just as frightening. His purple skin was covered in scars, and his 4 yellow eyes seemed to look at everything as if it was already his property. When he spoke, his voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "I am Sub-Commander Xylix Corthan of the Zephyrin Empire," he announced as he entered the meeting room. "I am here to accept your surrender and discuss the details of your enslavement." Helen remained seated at the negotiation table and smiled politely. "I am Ambassador Helen Parker, representing the people of Earth. We are here to discuss peaceful solutions to our disagreement. Corthan laughed, which sounded like breaking glass. There is no disagreement, human. There is only your surrender or your death. But since you asked for this meeting, I will show you why resistance is pointless. The alien commander activated a holographic projector that filled the room with three-dimensional images. The first image showed a beautiful planet with blue oceans and green continents, very similar to Earth. Cities covered the surface, and ships moved peacefully through space around the world. This was the home world of the Andromedan species, Corthan explained. They were a peaceful people who tried to negotiate with us, just like you are doing now. The image changed to show the same planet under attack. Thousands of Zephyrian ships surrounded the world, firing massive weapons that turned the cities into burning ruins. The Andromedan ships tried to fight back, but they were destroyed so quickly it was barely a battle. Helen kept her expression neutral, but inside she felt sick. Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Davis, who was sitting beside her as the military attach, was quietly recording everything on a hidden device while trying to look calm. The Andromedans offered to surrender after 1 day of fighting, Corthan continued. But the Empire decided they needed to learn a lesson about what happens to those who make us wait. The holographic images showed Zephyrian soldiers landing on the planet and forcing millions of Andromedans onto slave ships. But instead of taking all of them prisoner, the aliens began executing every 10th person to show their power. And we kept only the youngest and strongest as slaves, Corthan said with satisfaction. The rest were eliminated because they were not useful to the Empire. Dr. Nancy Wilson, the human xenobiologist who was part of the delegation, was studying the alien commander carefully while pretending to take notes. She had spent years learning about different alien species, and she was noticing things about Corthan that might be important later. The holographic display showed 2 more conquered worlds. The first was a desert planet where the inhabitants had tried to hide in underground cities. The Zephyrians had simply used massive drilling weapons to reach them and drag them to the surface. The second was a water world where the alien inhabitants lived in floating cities. The Empire had poisoned their oceans and forced them to surrender within hours. Every species thinks they are special, Corthan said, looking directly at Helen. Every species thinks they can find a way to defeat the Empire, but in 300 years, no one has ever succeeded. Helen finally spoke again. Sub-Commander, what you're showing us is not negotiation. It's genocide. The people of Earth will never accept terms that include the murder of innocent civilians. Corthan's 4 eyes all focused on her at once. Then you will all die. It makes no difference to the Empire whether you serve as slaves or fertilize the soil of your world with your bodies. Lieutenant Colonel Davis leaned forward slightly. What exactly are you demanding from us? The alien commander smiled, showing teeth that looked like metal spikes. Complete surrender of all military forces. All human leaders to be executed immediately. All humans between the ages of 15 and 50 to be taken as slaves. All others to be eliminated. Your world's resources to be stripped and sent to the Empire. Dr. Wilson looked up from her notes. And if we refuse? Then we will demonstrate our power by destroying one of your cities every hour until you beg us to accept your surrender. But by then, the terms will be much worse. Helen stood up slowly. She had heard enough to know that these creatures could never be reasoned with. They enjoyed causing pain and suffering. They saw other species not as equals, or even as enemies, but as objects to be used and thrown away. Sub-Commander Corthan, Helen said formally, on behalf of the people of Earth, I reject your terms completely. We will never surrender to murderers and slavers. The alien commander's expression changed to one of genuine surprise. In 300 years of conquest, Very few species had rejected the Empire's terms outright. Most begged for mercy or tried to negotiate for better conditions. "You are making a mistake that will cost your entire species their lives," Corthan warned. "When our fleet reaches your world, we will make your death so painful that other species will hear about it for generations. Then you had better bring a very large fleet," Helen replied calmly. The meeting ended with both sides knowing that war was inevitable. As the Zephyrian delegation left the station, Corthan sent a message to Admiral Vorthik, informing him that the humans had rejected all terms and should be considered extremely hostile. Back on the Terra Nova, Captain Morrison received a full report from the negotiating team. The recordings that Lieutenant Colonel Davis had made would be studied by every military analyst on Earth, and Dr. Wilson's observations about Zephyrian biology might prove crucial in the coming battle. "They're not just conquerors," Helen told Jake over the communication link. "They're sadists who enjoy causing suffering. They can't be bargained with or reasoned with." Jake nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to speak to them in the only language they understand." Unknown to the Zephyrians, Admiral Susan Martinez and the hidden human fleet had been listening to every word of the negotiations. The time for talking was over, and the time for fighting was about to begin. Admiral Vorthik stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his sensors as the Zephyrian fleet moved toward Earth. 800 massive warships spread across space in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready to destroy the small human world that had dared to refuse the Empire's generous offer of slavery. "Sir, we are detecting some unusual readings from the asteroid belt," reported his sensor officer, a nervous young Zephyrian named Kex. Vorthik barely looked up from his tactical display. "Probably just space rocks and mining equipment. These primitive species always leave debris floating around their solar systems." But Kex was not convinced. His instruments were showing energy signatures that seemed too organized to be random space junk. "Admiral, some of these readings look like they might be artificial structures." "Impossible," Vorthik replied. "Our intelligence reports show that humans have barely managed to reach their own moon. They do not have the technology to build anything significant in deep space." What Admiral Vorthik did not know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 5 years. Ever since the first Zephyrian scout ships had been detected, Earth's best engineers and scientists had been working in complete secrecy to build the most advanced defense network in the galaxy. Captain Ben Turner was waiting inside the stealth destroyer New York, which was disguised as a large asteroid near Jupiter. He had been sitting in the dark ship for 6 hours, watching the alien fleet approach and waiting for the signal to begin the attack. "All units, this is Admiral Martinez," came the voice over the secure communication channel. "Begin decloaking sequence in 30 seconds. Admiral Susan Martinez was commanding the operation from her flagship, the Washington, which was hidden behind one of Saturn's moons. She was a veteran military officer who had spent her entire career preparing for the day when Earth would have to defend itself against superior alien forces. "Remember, people," Admiral Martinez continued, "we only get one chance at this. The element of surprise is our greatest weapon. Make every shot count." All across the solar system, hidden human ships and battle stations began powering up their systems. For 5 years, they had been waiting in the cold darkness of space, their crews living in shifts and their weapon systems maintained in perfect condition for this exact moment. Commander Rachel Thompson was aboard the battleship California, which had been disguised as a piece of space debris near Mars for 3 years. As her ship's cloaking system deactivated, she could see the massive Zephyrian fleet spread out before her like a swarm of deadly insects. "Weapon systems online," reported her tactical officer. "All batteries charged and ready to fire." The cloaking systems on over 2,000 human vessels shut down at exactly the same moment. What had appeared to be empty space suddenly filled with warships, battle stations, and defensive platforms that surrounded the Zephyrian fleet from every direction. Admiral Vorthik stared at his tactical display in complete shock. The screen that had shown a few scattered human ships just seconds before was now covered with red warning symbols indicating massive hostile forces all around his fleet. How is this possible? Vorthik demanded. Where did all these ships come from? His communications officer was frantically trying to get readings on the human vessels. Sir, our computers are having trouble analyzing their technology. These ships are using energy signatures we have never encountered before. The human fleet was unlike anything the Zephyrian Empire had ever faced. Instead of building a few massive ships like the aliens did, humanity had constructed thousands of smaller, faster vessels that could work together like pieces of a giant. Machine Captain Tony Rodriguez commanded the cruiser Phoenix, which was part of the fleet that had been hiding near Neptune. As his ship moved into attack position, he opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. Zephyrian fleet, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now or be destroyed. Admiral Vorthik could not believe what he was hearing. No species had ever threatened the Zephyrian Empire before. The idea that these primitive humans thought they could defeat 800 Imperial warships was almost funny. Open fire on the nearest human vessel, Vorthik ordered. Show them what Imperial weapons can do. General Mordain, commanding the Zephyrian Advance Guard, selected the cruiser Phoenix as his target. 3 of his heavy battleships fired their main weapons at the human ship, releasing enough energy to destroy a small moon. But when the weapon's fire reached the Phoenix, something impossible happened. The human ship's shields absorbed the massive attack without taking any damage at all. Then the Phoenix fired back with weapons that cut through the Zephyrian shields like they were made of paper. The first Imperial ship to be destroyed was the heavy cruiser Sword of Empire. Captain Rodriguez's weapons tore through its hull in seconds, causing massive explosions that lit up the darkness of space. The crew of 8,000 Zephyrians died before they even understood what had hit them. Impossible, Vorthik shouted. No species has weapons that powerful. But the destruction of the Sword of Empire was just the beginning. All across the solar system, human ships were opening fire on the Zephyrian fleet with weapons that used technology the Empire had never seen before. Colonel Amy Foster was commanding the carrier ship Enterprise, which launched squadrons of small fighter craft that moved faster than anything the Zephyrians could track. The human fighters swarmed around the alien ships like angry insects, striking at weak points in their armor and disappearing before the heavy weapons could target them. Captain Diana Kelly was in charge of the Mars orbital defense platforms, which had been disguised as research stations for years. When she activated the massive particle beam weapons hidden inside the platforms, they fired beams of pure energy that could destroy an Imperial dreadnought with a single shot. The Zephyrian fleet, which had conquered 300 star systems, suddenly found itself trapped in a carefully planned ambush. Every move they tried to make was anticipated by the human commanders, who had studied Imperial tactics for years and knew exactly how to counter them. Admiral Vorthik watched in horror as ship after ship of his mighty fleet was destroyed by the human weapons. The tactical display that had shown an easy victory just minutes before was now filled with the symbols of destroyed and damaged Imperial vessels. Sir, we are losing ships faster than we can count them, reported his tactical officer. The humans seem to know exactly where to hit us for maximum damage. Lieutenant Commander Chris Evans was piloting the experimental ship Endeavour, which had been designed specifically to penetrate enemy defenses. His mission was to reach the Zephyrian flagship and disable their communication systems, cutting the alien fleet off from the rest of the Empire. As the Endeavour raced through the battle, Dodging massive explosions and laser fire, Chris could see that the human plan was working perfectly. The Zephyrian fleet was being torn apart by weapons and tactics they had never encountered before. The hunters had become the hunted, and the mighty Zephyrian Empire was about to learn what it felt like to be on the losing side of a battle for the first time in 300 years. The space battle spread across the entire solar system as Admiral Vorthik desperately called for reinforcements from the Zephyrian core worlds. His mighty fleet of 800 ships was being destroyed faster than he could believe possible, and he needed help immediately. "Send an emergency signal to the home fleet," Vorthik ordered his communications officer. "Tell them we need at least 2,000 more ships. These humans are not what we expected." But Captain Jake Morrison had predicted this move. The human fleet split into 3 massive battle groups, each one targeting a different section of the Imperial Armada. The plan was to destroy the Zephyrian fleet before their reinforcements could arrive. Commander Steve Johnson was leading the Jupiter Defense Squadron, which consisted of 200 human ships that had been hiding in the gas giant's atmosphere. His job was to stop the Zephyrian heavy cruisers that were trying to break through the human formation and escape back to their home territory. "All ships follow my lead," Steve commanded as his squadron moved to intercept the fleeing aliens. "Use Formation Delta 7 and target their engine systems. We need to stop them from running away." The human ships moved in patterns that confused the Zephyrian commanders, who had never seen such creative tactics before. Instead of fighting in straight lines like most species did, the humans attacked from multiple directions at once, appearing and disappearing like ghosts in the darkness of space. Steve's flagship, the destroyer Boston, fired its main weapons at the Zephyrian heavy cruiser Death's Hand. The alien ship's shields collapsed under the assault, and secondary explosions tore through its hull. The massive vessel broke apart in a series of bright flashes, its crew of 12,000 dying in seconds. Meanwhile, Captain Diana Kelly was commanding the Mars orbital defense platforms, which had been secretly built over the past 5 years. The platforms looked like ordinary space stations from the outside, but they were actually massive weapons that could destroy the largest Zephyrian dreadnoughts with single shots. "Target the enemy flagship," Diana ordered her weapons crew. "Charge the main particle cannon to full power." The Mars defense platform fired a beam of pure energy that was brighter than the sun. The beam struck the Zephyrian super dreadnought Mountain Crusher directly in its center, causing the enormous ship to explode in a fireball that could be seen from Earth. Admiral Vorthik watched in horror as his strongest ships were destroyed one by one. The humans seemed to know exactly where the Zephyrian vessels were weakest, and their weapons were far more powerful than anything the Empire had ever encountered. "How do they know our weak points?" Vorthik demanded of his tactical officer. "It's like they have been studying our ships for years." The truth was that humanity had been studying Zephyrian technology ever since the first scout ships were captured 5 years ago. Dr. Patricia Green, working from Earth's command center, was providing real-time analysis of Imperial weaknesses to the human fleet commanders. "The Zephyrian ships have a vulnerability in their shield generators," Dr. Green reported over the communication network. "If you hit them at the connection points between the hull sections, their entire defensive system will collapse." Her research was proving crucial as the human forces exploited every weakness in the Imperial design. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that understood their technologies so well, and they were paying the price for their overconfidence. Lieutenant Commander Chris Evans was still racing toward the Zephyrian flagship in his experimental ship, Endeavor. His mission was to disable their quantum communication array and cut off the alien fleet from the rest of the Empire. As Chris flew through the chaos of the space battle, he could see human ships everywhere, darting between the massive Zephyrian vessels like tiny fish attacking giant sharks. Explosions lit up the darkness, as Imperial ships died one after another. "Endeavor to all units," Chris reported. "I'm almost at the enemy flagship. Cover me for 30 more seconds." The human fighters swarmed around the Zephyrian command ship, keeping its defensive weapons busy while Chris made his final approach. The Endeavor was small enough to slip through the gaps in the alien ship's armor, but Chris had to be incredibly careful not to be hit by the massive energy beams that were firing in all directions. Chris found the weak point in the flagship's hull that Dr. Green had identified and fired his ship's cutting laser. The beam sliced through the alien metal like a hot knife through butter, creating a hole just big enough for the Endeavor to slip inside. Once inside the enemy ship, Chris raced through the corridors toward the communication center. The Zephyrian crew was too busy fighting the battle to notice one small human ship flying through their vessel, and Chris reached his target without being detected. The quantum communication array was a massive device that filled an entire room. Chris fired his ship's weapons directly into the center of the machine, causing it to explode in a shower of sparks and alien metal. "Communication array destroyed," Chris reported. "The enemy fleet is now cut off from their home worlds." The effect was immediate. Without contact with the Empire's command structure, the Zephyrian fleet began to panic. Individual ship commanders started making their own decisions, and the careful coordination that had made the Imperial Navy so effective began to fall apart. General Mordain, whose own flagship was badly damaged and losing life support, tried to take command of the remaining ships. But with 70% of the fleet already destroyed, he had very few options left. "All ships retreat to the outer system," Mordain ordered. "We need to regroup and wait for reinforcements." But there was nowhere to run. The human fleet had positioned itself to block every escape route, and the Zephyrian ships that tried to flee were quickly hunted down and destroyed. Captain Morrison, now commanding the combined human fleet from his ship Terra Nova, watched as the last of the Imperial heavy cruisers exploded under fire from human destroyers. The once mighty Zephyrian armada was now nothing but scattered debris floating in space. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship," reported his communications officer. "They're asking for a ceasefire." Morrison could hardly believe what he was hearing. The Zephyrian Empire, which had never lost a battle in 300 years, was actually asking to stop fighting. The beings who had threatened to enslave all of humanity were now begging for mercy. The tide of battle had turned completely, and the galaxy was about to witness something that had never happened before in recorded history. Admiral Vorthik stood in the ruins of his flagship's bridge, watching as the last of his fleet burned in the darkness of space. 70% of his ships were destroyed, and the rest were badly damaged with failing life support systems. Around him, wounded crew members tried desperately to keep their ship running while human vessels surrounded them on all sides. "Sir, hull breach on decks 12 through 15, reported his damage control officer. "We're losing atmosphere fast, and the backup power systems are failing." Vorthik had commanded fleets for 40 years and had never experienced anything like this defeat. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds and enslaved millions of beings, but they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. General Mordain's voice came through the damaged communication system from his own crippled ship. "Admiral, my flagship is dead in space. Life support will fail in less than 1 hour. We need to surrender before we all die out here." The word surrender had never been spoken by a Zephyrian commander before. For 300 years, the Empire had been the one demanding surrender from other species. The idea of giving up was so foreign that Vorthik could barely understand what was happening. Captain Jake Morrison received the alien transmission on his flagship Terra Nova. After hours of fierce fighting, the human fleet had achieved total victory, but Jake felt no joy in the destruction he was seeing. The space around Earth was filled with the wreckage of alien ships and the bodies of millions of Zephyrian soldiers. "Sir, the alien admiral is requesting permission to speak with you directly," reported his communications officer. Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were exhausted from the battle, but they had saved their world from slavery and genocide. "Put him through." Admiral Vorthik appeared on the main screen, and Jake was shocked by what he saw. The proud alien warrior who had threatened to destroy Earth just days before now looked broken and defeated. His purple skin was covered in cuts, and 2 of his 4 eyes were swollen shut from injuries. "Human Commander," Vorthik said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am Admiral Krex Vorthik of the Zephyrian Empire. I am requesting a ceasefire." Jake had been prepared for many things, but not for this. "You're requesting a ceasefire? A few hours ago, you were demanding our complete surrender." "That was before I understood what your species is capable of," Vorthik replied. "We have underestimated humanity, and we have paid the price for our arrogance." President William Hayes arrived at Luna Station just as the surrender negotiations were beginning. He had been watching the battle from Earth's command bunker, hardly believing that humanity had actually defeated the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "What are their terms?" President Hayes asked Captain Morrison over the secure communication link. "They haven't offered any terms yet," Jake replied. "I think they're waiting for us to tell them what we want." Ambassador Helen Parker, who had returned from the failed negotiations just hours before, was brought into the discussion. She had seen firsthand how cruel and merciless the Zephyrian Empire could be, and she knew they could not be trusted to keep any agreement they made. "We need to be very careful," Helen warned. "These beings have no concept of honor or mercy. They will try to trick us if they can." Admiral Susan Martinez, commanding the human fleet from her flagship Washington, opened a channel to all ships. "All units maintain battle readiness. Do not lower your guard until we have a complete surrender." The surrender negotiations took place over several hours, with human leaders debating what terms to demand from the defeated empire. Some wanted to destroy the remaining Zephyrian ships completely, while others argued for showing mercy to prevent future conflicts. Commander Lisa Brooks, analyzing the situation from her intelligence center, provided crucial information about the Empire's structure. "Sir, if we let them return to their home worlds, they might come back with an even larger fleet in a few years." Dr. Patricia Green, who had studied Zephyrian psychology during the battle, offered a different perspective. "Actually, I think this defeat will change their entire civilization. They have never lost before, and it will take them decades to recover from the shock." Finally, Captain Morrison and President Hayes agreed on the terms they would offer to the Zephyrian Empire. The conditions were harsh but fair, designed to prevent future attacks while avoiding unnecessary killing. Jake opened a communication channel to Admiral Vorthik's flagship. "Admiral, these are our terms. Your empire must withdraw from all human space immediately. You must release all enslaved species in your territory. You must recognize Earth's sovereignty and promise never to attack human colonies." Vorthik listened to the terms with growing amazement. He had expected the humans to demand the complete destruction of his fleet and the execution of all survivors. Instead, they were offering terms that would allow the Empire to survive, even if it meant giving up much of their power. "And if we refuse these terms?" Vorthik asked, though he already knew the answer. "Then we will finish what you started," Jake replied calmly. "Your remaining ships will be destroyed, and we will send our fleet to your home worlds to make sure you never threaten innocent civilizations again." The Zephyrian admiral looked around his ruined bridge at the faces of his surviving crew members. They were all looking at him, waiting for his decision. He knew that refusing the human terms would mean the death of everyone under his command. "I accept your terms," Vorthik said quietly. The Zephyrian Empire formally surrenders to humanity. The words seemed to hang in the air like a physical presence. Never before in galactic history had the mighty Zephyrian Empire surrendered to anyone. The beings who had enslaved 47 species and conquered 300 star systems were now begging for mercy from the humans they had planned to enslave. Commander Lisa Brooks immediately began broadcasting the surrender across all frequencies, making sure that every species in the galaxy would know what had happened. The message was clear. Humanity would not tolerate threats to innocent civilizations, and they now had the power to enforce galactic peace. "Please," Admiral Vorthik said, his voice breaking with emotion that no Zephyrian had ever shown before. "Allow my surviving ships to return home. We will honor the agreement and release all our slaves. The Empire will never threaten humanity." Again, Jake looked at the defeated alien commander and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The battle was over, and Earth was safe, but the cost had been enormous. Millions of beings had died in the fighting, and the galaxy would never be the same. "Your ships may return home," Jake said finally. "But remember this day, Admiral. Remember what happens when you threaten the innocent." As the surviving Zephyrian vessels limped away from Earth's solar system, Captain Morrison watched them go and wondered what kind of galaxy humanity had just inherited. They had won the battle and saved their world, but now they would have to help rebuild a galaxy that had been terrorized by the Empire. For centuries, the age of Zephyrian dominance was over, and the age of human protection was about to begin.